Chapter 9 of the Me Addiction is called Excuse Me. We look at this chapter how Adam and Eve both, after their sin, instead of admitting their sin and confessing their sin and owning up to it, suddenly they start making excuses. Adam says, well, the woman you gave me made me do this. And we've been doing that ever since Adam, haven't we? We make our own excuses for our own sin. We want to challenge you in this chapter to see where that creeps up in your own life. And see how hard it is for you to just admit who you are and where you are in life. And make that confession, because until you make that confession, it's going to be very difficult to get rid of the me addiction and add God addiction to your life.
Chapter 9 is titled Excuse Me. And really this chapter talks about the idea that it's easy to point the blame and point the finger at someone else rather than at ourselves. That when we look at decisions that are made or situations that happen in our life, it's a lot easier to blame others than to accept the responsibility that we had a part in that decision or that consequence. And so the fallout of the me addiction is that it's easy to think of myself as being the only one that's right, and I'm never at fault, and others are to blame. And so this chapter really exposes that flaw and that idea that we're always right, that there are consequences to our decisions, and that we do have a hand in how things happen and the way they play out.
I think as soon as that me addiction hit, excuses became a way of life.
Yes.
One of the fun stories that we tell in here is about a guy named Rich Sekrenta.
No, that's an awesome story.
Sekrenta was the guy who created the very first computer virus. And it was in 1982 with an Apple II computer, and what it was what they now call a boot sector virus, but they didn't call it back then because they didn't have a name for it.
Right.
And he would put something on his disk, he'd put it into a computer as a floppy disk. Some of you might, Reg probably remembers that. I don't know if you remember that, Clint, but anyway. And it would put it on that computer, and someone else puts a floppy disk in, it comes out, and they've got the virus. And later on he was asked, why did you do that? And he just blamed it on being young. Well, I was in 9th grade at the time. And
how convenient.
It's a great story, especially since it's working off of an apple. But, you go back to the garden and what happened. God comes in and starts asking them about what happened. And what, do you remember, Glenn, do you remember what Adam said?
She made me do it.
And not even just she made me do it, but the woman you gave me.
Oh, man. That didn't go over well,
so,
I guess.
we don't just blame each other, we blame God. Excuses run rampant.
Well, again, you can't read this chapter and not see your own struggle. In fact, I'm gonna really say that the chapter, excuse me, chapter 9, is absolutely going to bring you to your knees.
Yes.
Even if you really resist some of the causes of the me addiction in the story in Genesis, you're going to really see yourself in this chapter, and you're going to see the excuses you make, and I believe it'll call us to hunger for God's work to transform our character. Maybe in ways you have never felt before. I believe this chapter is going to bring breakthrough, and I believe it's going to transform hundreds of thousands of Christians as they really see the call to live out a Christ-focused life in a new way, in a new age.
That's excellent.
Yeah, and the call is to lay aside the excuses and move towards confession.
Absolutely.
And repentance
Right.
and change.